The ingredients for the pâte à choux, which is the name for the pastry, P-A-T-E-A-C-H-O-U-X, pâte à choux, which means cabbage pastry, because the French are hilarious, and the original shape of the puff, the cream puff, was reminiscent of a head of cabbage. And so there you go. Pâte à choux is called cabbage pastry. It's the same dough almost exactly that we make churros out of too. So you could take this recipe for the dough and then pipe it into like a deep fryer and you've got churros. So you're learning a bunch of techniques here today. We're going to be making the pâte à choux, which is a really specialized technique. It's not difficult as long as you follow the instructions pretty clearly. And then the filling, we're skipping the pastry cream filling. That would have taken a whole nother hour. We're just going to be making a whipped cream filling for both the cream puffs and the eclairs. If you wanted to, you could make eclairs and then look up a recipe. The traditional filling for an eclair would be that pastry cream filling, which is not whipped cream. It's more of a custard-based cream. So there's lots of wonderful recipes I can recommend for that. If you want to, email me and ask. But an eclair filled with whipped cream, I think, is pretty much heavenly. Anyway, we're going to glaze it with some chocolate. As long as we get to everything here, we've got some things to do. So I've got, like I said, my ingredients already measured out for the pâte à choux. I want it all to be ready to go. We're going to be making that in a sauce pot and then in a stand mixer. I'm going to be using the stand mixer. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can absolutely make it in a bowl. You're just going to be getting a good arm workout, which is super good. We're all into fitness here. I'm going to get out my sauce pot. You want to make sure that you're using one. Sorry about that. You want to make sure that you're using one that is big enough that you can really stir in it. You don't want one that is just the right size, because then all your flour and everything is going to go flying. We're really going to be giving this a vigorous stir in this pot. So I'm choosing one that's maybe a little bit wider than my ingredients would dictate so that I can kind of go to town on the mixing part of it. So I've got that. We're going to make the pâte à choux in this pot, like I said, all except for the eggs. Those are going to get mixed in the mixer or in a bowl with a whisk. Either way, you're just going to be really, really mixing it. And then it comes together incredibly fast. We are then going to put the dough aside, let it cool down just a bit. There's some cooling processes. And then while they bake, we're going to be making our whipped cream filling and our chocolate glaze topping for the eclair. So we can really kind of get started. Oven to 425. They bake hot and quickly. Like I said, your pot to make the dough in. You want to have a sheet pan ready to go. I've got mine lined with the silicone mat. Parchment would be great. If you don't have either of those, just very lightly grease the pan and just use the pan. Foil wouldn't really help in this situation. I have piping bags. I'm going to be using one of these. They're not cloth, but they're not plastic. They're that kind of reusable, washable piping bag material. If you do not have a piping bag, a large Ziploc bag is perfect. We're going to let the dough cool just enough that it's not going to hurt the Ziploc bag. They're treated for warm things. And then you just cut a little hole in it and you can still pipe out nice little eclairs from a Ziploc bag. You don't have to have any special things for that. The cream puff is just like a scoop, so that's even easier. That's why it looked like cabbage, I guess. It's just like a blob. So really, really traditional cream puff dough. This is going to go a long way for you. So looking at the recipe, you want to really make sure that you read it all the way through when you're baking. I've got my water. 8 tablespoons of butter is a lot, but it gets spread out amongst all of the different things that we're baking. Plus, I mean, you signed up for Eclair class. You knew what you were getting. We're doing a little touch of salt that brings out the natural flavor, kind of balances out the sweetness. 1 1/4 cups of flour. I always recommend unbleached, just because why are we bleaching our food? And then 4 large eggs, and those are going to go in separately. So I haven't cracked them or broken them yet because I'm going to be doing that one at a time. You can't mix all 4 into the dough at once. It will definitely not work. This is one thing you have to do, like add the egg, let it mix, add the egg, let it mix, and so on. So really easily to start out, we're going to be putting everything except the eggs and the flour. We're adding our water, butter, and salt into this pot. We're gonna bring it up to a boil. As soon as the butter is all melted and there's good bubbles, we're gonna turn the heat off, put it to the side so it's not like super, super hot right where it was. And then we're gonna dump in our flour all at the same time. And this is when we need to really be ready to stir. One thing that I highly recommend when making pâte à choux dough is use a wooden utensil or a silicone utensil. Don't use a whisk or a metal spoon. It can cause kind of like a taste reaction while you're cooking the flour and the flour out. So you want to use wood if you can. And then silicone would be a second best option. Where's my favorite little, here we go. I like one of these because it's kind of bent over. You can really get into the corners of the pot and really make sure that you're scraping your edges. You don't want any of that flour to dry out and burn like in the corners. So once you're ready, then we're gonna start. You turn your pot, you get your water and your butter and your salt into it, and you turn it to medium heat. We're gonna keep this on medium for the majority of the time until we turn it off. So 1 cup of water, 1 stick of butter, and it's 3/8 of a teaspoon of salt. I know that's annoying. What that is just a little bit less than a half a teaspoon. So 3/8 of a teaspoon would just be a teeny tiny bit less than a half a teaspoon. So you can just measure that into your half a teaspoon measure and just put a little bit less. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm using kosher salt because I really kind of want a little bit extra flavor. I like my sweets to be a tiny, tiny bit savory. You can use table salt. You can use sea salt. It will all dissolve and cook out pretty well. So I'm just making sure that I'm doing a little bit less than that half a teaspoon. And that's gonna get added in. You can definitely chop up your butter first, break it into chunks, but it's gonna get melted down into this as the water heats up and as the bottom of the pot heats up. You're gonna stir it around. It's gonna melt up pretty quickly. Once that comes to a melted butter and boil of water, we're gonna continue. Just wanna make sure that I have everything else ready because once we get going, it's not really one of those things that you can kind of like, well, once we get the dough made, then you can kind of pause and reassess the situation. And then once the dough, the shapes are into the oven, you can absolutely like reassess. That's what we're gonna do through this process. But this is a fast one and we're gonna use the entire hour here. As usual, you can always find pictures of the finished product on our Instagram page. And if there are any questions, type them into the chat. I will take a look as often as I can. Is there a sub for the powdered sugar for the whipped cream? You can absolutely use white sugar, just granulated sugar. It just won't be quite as smooth, but it'll dissolve into it as it whips up. I would just use a little bit less of the powdered sugar, but regular granulated sugar would work just fine. Some people always make their whipped cream with granulated sugar. It's really, it's not interchangeable, but it does work both ways. Excellent question. If there are any other questions that pop up, I'm going to keep the chat window open over here so you guys can, you don't have to wait until the very end. If something pops into your head, type it in there and I'll get to them as soon as I can. So as this comes, the butter is melting pretty nicely. Let me get this turned around because you're going to want to see the action here. I think that will work. Let me see. I'm going to prop you up again. You can really see down into it. There we go. Much better, huh? Okay, as this melts, which it is almost done doing, it's going to start to boil. You want it to be at a pretty rapid boil, but you don't want to lose a lot of your liquid. That you need that to be in there. So it needs to happen pretty quickly before too much of it evaporates. This big pot also kind of helps spread out the surface, so it will actually start to boil a little bit faster than if it were in a deeper condensed area in a smaller pot. So my butter is completely melted. I'm starting to get bubbles forming right in the center, which means it's going to be at a boil quickly. So what's going to happen now is quick. We're going to dump all that flour in at the same time. It's really counterintuitive. It seems like, wait, what? Are you sure that's what we're supposed to do? And I know, yes, it's weird, but okay, I'm at a boil. We're going to dump in all that flour all at the same time and then stir it as fast and as hard as I possibly can. You want to, like vigorously. It says vigorously, it means vigorously, and you'll see why. It's going to start to try to like clump and be weird, and you need to just keep mixing, and then eventually it's going to, I'm going to turn the heat off as I add it, and then we'll turn it right back on. It's going to start coming together as a dough and pulling away from the sides of the pan and becoming smooth as you mix it. So just wait, it will work. All at once. And then heat back on to about medium. And I'm just stirring. It looks awful right now. You want to make sure it's like all in there and you've got all the flour mixed into the liquid. You're stirring really hard. Scrape the sides and the bottom as you go. It's going to start, see, it's come together very nicely. You have to keep doing this for about a minute to cook out that dry flour and to cook the raw flour. Flour is technically a raw product. You want to cook it mostly because we want to get rid of that flavor of raw flour. It doesn't taste very good. And this also just helps kind of bring it all together into this pasty, gluey dough. Once it's sliding around the pot and following your spoon like this, it's pretty much done. That's it. So we want to let this cool just for maybe 5 minutes because we don't want to put the eggs in while it's piping hot. It will scramble our eggs. But we do still want it to be warm. You don't want it to get colder than 125 degrees. If you do have a thermometer, use it. Just stick that end of it into the dough. If not, just wait maybe 5 minutes until I say go, and I think that we'll come to the right temperature together. But you can see how well that came together in this like nice kind of glossy, smooth ball of dough, which is not ready yet. We're going to be adding the eggs. So that's that. We're going to go over to the mixer. Yeah, I don't think I can bring it over here. I'll bring the camera over there, and then we're going to add everything into that situation, our eggs. If you're doing this by hand, this is when you would put this into a big bowl, a big plastic or glass bowl, and let it cool off, same about 5 minutes, and then you're going to be working your shoulders and your biceps with that same wooden tool and beating in the eggs one at a time. I'm going to be using the mixer. I need to change attachments. You don't want to use the whisk for this. You want to use the paddle attachment, which is that. That is our paddle for a mixer. So you want to use that because that's going to really beat the dough around the bowl. We're not trying to incorporate air, which the whisk would do. We're just trying to get those eggs really beat into it. So I am going to, let's see, I'm going to get the camera set up first. Sorry, small kitchen problems. Sure, other people understand. I'm going to bring you guys over here though so you can actually see, because how it works in the bowl is important. All right. Let's see. Good view, good enough. Okay. As it goes into this bowl, I'm going to add the eggs one at a time. You will see this is nice and holding together in a nice solid ball. Just goes right in there, really easy. The eggs one at a time, so I'm going to crack them each one at a time right into the bowl as it mixes. You can definitely break them into something else and then pour it into it if you're concerned about getting shells or breaking the egg badly into the thing. Totally understandable. I do that enough. You can break the eggs one at a time, like into a separate cup, and then pour that in there. So I'm gonna just break it in. I'm gonna get this up and mixing. Raise it up. See. So you don't need it at super high speed, but you want it at enough of a beat that it's going to incorporate the eggs quickly enough before they start to cook. It's not going to look good until you put in the last egg. Everyone, you're going to be like, what? This looks horrible.
What speed do you have yours on?
Just on 2, like kind of a low medium speed.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. That's only the 3rd egg. You really want to make sure that each egg gets incorporated individually before you add the next one. You can kind of see that it's starting to come a little bit together. It's not looking as like separated and gross. Once you have the last egg in, you can go ahead and turn the speed up to maybe a 4 and just let it really incorporate it. It's going to bring it all together. And yeah, I hope you can see that. It has spread, it's turned into now a sticky dough. And that's it. So that's the pat a choux. I'm going to bring the camera back over here. You're going to be able to look at other things. We're going to be moving back and forth a bunch today. I apologize for that. We want to get this part done and piped onto the sheet pan so that we can get this into the oven and baking as quickly as possible. I think somebody asked, is it on heat while mixing? Not at this point, not in the mixer. It's still hot, but it's not on the heat. While you put the flour in, it was on heat. Yeah, you have to cook out the flour for about a minute, so that's about a medium heat while you stir it in the pot. Over there in the mixer or in your bowl, it's not on heat. The other question, did you send the recipe? Yes, it should have been on the email both last week and yesterday with the reminder. And then I'm sorry, if you didn't get that, if you registered for the class through the system, then your email should be on the list. We can talk afterwards about that. I'm gonna move into shaping and piping because I wanna get this dough into the oven. So, like I said, I'm using one of these piping bags. I'm not using any of the special piping tips. We don't need any shape. If you were making churros, you would put in one of the star tips and it would make the fluted edge for the churro, but we're making eclairs, so we're not gonna do that. To get this out of the bowl and into our piping bag, and I'll show you a fun trick for how to best do that. If you have a Tupperware, any kind of like empty container, put your piping bag into it with the tip folded up, and then it'll kind of hold open the bag for you. Maybe get a smaller cup if you need. And then you can put in some of your pastry dough. This pat a choux doesn't look or feel anything like any other kind of dough that you've worked with before. It's very wet, it's very loose. You can't really touch it with your hands or shape it or knead it. It's we're kind of in between a pancake batter or like a cake batter and an actual dough. So Let me see if you can see that. Came together very nicely. The eggs got whipped in really well. If you see any little like orange chunks, that means that your yolk got cooked and scrambled. So it's not great. That has definitely happened to me, making kinds of cooked egg custards, which is why you really need to mix it quickly and one at a time. That really helps the temperature stay safe. So as you can see, I just put my spatula right into there, and then I'm going to use the bag itself to pull it off the spatula. And then I've got a pastry bag with enough in here to make a few little eclairs. So then you grab the bag and you twist it, which tightens the air inside, creating that nice, good, tight bag. At that point, it's starting to come towards the tip, and so we're ready. If you want to really make perfect eclairs, this is how you do it in a pastry shop, how we learn in school. Turn your parchment paper upside down and draw with a ruler perfectly measured 4-inch lines, or 5-inch, or whatever inch eclair you want, and then turn the parchment paper back over so that when you trace it on the parchment, you can see the line, but you're not actually tracing your dough on top of the ink. So do it on the back side of the paper, flip it over. You can also do that with circles. If you want to make a perfect circle of something, you draw it on the underside of your parchment paper, flip the parchment paper over, and then you can trace it. I'm just going to do general shapes, eclair shapes here, because I like a little rustic stuff to my desserts. So I'm just going to pipe out. You gently squeeze the bag. You want to make them about a 1/2 inch thick. They will puff, but you need to make them at least a little bit thick to give it some to start with. If you made a very fine line, we wouldn't have enough air inside to be able to fill it with anything. You need to make this wide enough that when it does puff, you're going to have some space inside to put in our nice filling. You can make them bigger. It'll just take longer to bake. You can definitely play around with size and shape. I'm just going to slowly pull my hand down the line while squeezing with the other hand. Like I'm guiding with my left, squeezing with my right, and I'm pulling my hand only fast enough that like the width that I want it to be. So if you don't want that little tail tip, you can brush that down. Just keep piping little logs. You can play around with shape and size, like I said. You can make little eclair bites. You can make really long eclairs. Traditionally, they're about 8 inches, I think. I like them a little smaller because then I don't feel so guilty. I can have more of them. This dough should make about 20 to 24 small eclairs. I'm going to make an assortment. I don't want just eclairs in my life. I want some cream puffs too. So I'm going to make some puffs here as well. I said we can use cream scoop instead. Yeah, like to scoop out the cream puff shapes, you can absolutely use a scoop. You can just use spoons if you want. Like some of those little ice cream scoops would be really perfect. You can then just dot them out. You want to make them about 2 inches though of a mound, so that when it puffs, you have room to again cut it in half and fill it. Since I have dough in this piping bag, I'm just going to use this, but make puffs. So these are going to puff up. I'm just gently squeezing down and lifting my hand as I squeeze out. So I'm lifting while I squeeze downward, which creates the puff. I'm going to add a little bit more dough to this bag just so I can fill up my sheet pan, and we're going to get these in the oven. They need to bake for, well, it's going to be, I think, what was it? We start and then we turn the heat down. 15 minutes, and then we're going to turn it down to 350, and then another 25 minutes or so. So we definitely want to get this going. Make a few more here. Again, you kind of want to soften that little tip, if it forms like a sharp tip, that can burn. So you want to make sure that it's kind of smooth on the surface. And if it doesn't want to smooth out with just your finger, then put a teeny tiny drop of water on your finger and then dab that little sharp edge down, and it will help smooth the surface of the cream puff or the eclair. If it's like one of those sort of little tips that's created by lifting up your piping bag, then you want to make sure that's nice and smooth. It will burn. Okay. So I think I've got enough on here. Let's just see how these all turn out. I'm going to need to use that mixer bowl again, so I'm going to have to clean that out. But first and foremost, we're going to put these in the oven, 425 for now. Set our timer for 15 minutes, although I'm going to set mine for 10. I like to always check them just a little bit before the recipe says, because I made them a little small, and so they might cook faster. My oven might be running a little hotter than the rest. You know, it's just, you want to be a little bit more preventative than like, wait, it said 15 minutes, but they're burnt. Like, it might be 12 in your oven. So you have to kind of be a little bit careful. Like I said, I'm going to set mine for 10. And we'll just see how that looks in a minute. I'm going to very quickly clean out that little mixer bowl, because then we're going to go back over there and make our whipped cream in it. I need that. The chocolate glaze is as easy as it could be. I was going to say easy as pie, but if you were in our pie class and tart class, you realize that that's kind of a misnomer. Pie is not necessarily the easiest dough in the world, but this chocolate glaze is very simple. We're going to be mixing chocolate chips. Semi-sweet is best. You get a little bit of that sweetness. If you like dark chocolate, you can use dark chocolate. And then we're going to mix that with cream. If you don't have cream or couldn't find cream, you can mix it with a little bit of milk. That would be fine. It's just going to be a little bit thinner. That's fine too. Especially since it's a glaze. It will still be really nice. We're going to make this in the microwave today. You can definitely make it in a double boiler. Set up a little pot of water and put a glass or metal bowl on top and whisk your cream and chocolate. That's a really great way to do it. You're basically making like a quick ganache that way. We're going to just do it in the microwave because it's super fast, and it's another way to use the microwave. You can put the cream and the chocolate in a microwave safe bowl, put it in the microwave and blast it for 20-second intervals, stirring in between each time. And then once it's all melted and thickened and hot, it's ready. So we're going to get that going, and we're going to make our whipped cream. I need to clean this bowl really fast. Somebody asked, and it's perfectly fine to use ready-made whipped cream. If you have one of those like cans of whipped cream, even easier, you can just use that to fill it. There are tricks to making homemade whipped cream. If you don't have a mixer, you can make it in a blender. You can make it in a food processor. Anything that stirs incredibly fast will make whipped cream for you. You just have to be attentive and don't like turn it on, let it run, and walk away, because then you'll make butter, which is a fun experiment, I suppose, but not what you're going for here. So I'm going to set some of this dough aside because I don't want to get rid of it. If you have any extra, you can save it in a bag in the fridge and make more later, or make churros the next morning or something. It lasts for maybe a couple of days. It wouldn't freeze. Pâte dough doesn't freeze very well. So I'm going to just put it in this container, let it cool down, and make some more fun stuff later. Meanwhile, I don't have a dishwasher, so we wash this bowl very quickly. Making whipped cream in a mixer is definitely the easiest way to do it, but like I said, if you do have a food processor, that's another great way to do it, because you can actually make smaller quantities in there. The blade has the easier chance of reaching the cream than the whisk attachment would if you're making a very small amount in this very large mixer, let's say. Then it's, you know, it's gonna take a while. But if you use a food processor, you can make pretty much any size amount of whipped cream, and it works really, really well. Especially if you have one of those like little guys, maybe even a Ninja, like those bullets, that would work. Like I said, anything that has the energy to mix it incredibly fast. Although making it from scratch, making it by hand, is absolutely possible, and especially if you're making a small amount. And it's a good test of your shoulders, and it's fun to make the new cooks do it when they first start working for you. So clean bowl, whipped cream. I'm just going to be adding my cream directly to the bowl. I'm using whatever I have left over because I measured out what I need for my chocolate glaze. And then I think I have about a half a cup left over. I'm gonna bring the camera back over. Just give me a second. Time are we? Oh yeah, okay. All right, let's see about this. I think that everybody has seen whipped cream in their life. If not, I'm so sorry and welcome to heaven because it's the best. I love whipped cream. If it's dangerous if it's around me, just give me a spoon and I'll go to town. We are making a pretty simple version. It's got powdered sugar and vanilla extract. This is classic like chantilly cream. I've got my vanilla and my powdered sugar. This calls for 2 cups. I didn't have 2 cups. I'm making about a quarter of this amount, so I'm going to change my sugar and vanilla ingredients accordingly. So that would make it really just about a tablespoon of sugar and a couple of drops of the vanilla for a small amount of whipped cream. You can definitely change the amount of sugar that I've got there written down. Some people like their whipped cream hardly sweetened at all. Some people like it a little bit extra sweet. That's a personal thing. You'll get to know how you like stuff as you cook more. Let's see if this even mixes it. So I'm gonna have to leave that for a minute. It's such a small amount of cream at the bottom. The whisk is having a hard time even reaching it. I might have to transfer to a different thing. Checking my questions. Yeah, it's an extremely sticky dough. You're not really meant to touch it or manage it. So hopefully you got it scooped into the bag. It helps if you let it cool down a little bit. Maybe it was still a little bit hot. And yes, of course, the shapes don't really matter. It's just how like thick they are. You want the inside to be able to cook all the way through. So just need to make sure that as it cooks, the inside gets all the way done if they're like large chunks. But yeah, the shapes don't really matter. They're gonna taste great. So I'm looking at the, let's see. I'm not sure it's even gonna work. I might have to add a little bit of this cream and then use a little bit of milk for this. Yeah, not even reaching the. All right, that'll work. Depending on how much cream you have in your bowl, you want to be careful about the speed that you mix it. If you have a lot of cream, if it's halfway or more, that's probably too much. It's gonna double in volume at least, and then you have too much cream, whipped cream that's all going everywhere. If you have like between a quarter of the bowl and half of the bowl filled, you want to start at a slower speed until it starts to get a little bit thicker, and then you turn the speed up to high. Otherwise, you're going to have cream splashed all over your face and all over the room. I've done that, so it's a mess. Don't do that. So I have such a small amount in the bottom of that bowl that I'm just going to let it rip at high speed, and it'll bring it together pretty quickly. I hope. You can add your sugar and vanilla now. You can add it at the beginning. You can add it at the end. A lot of cooks vary their opinions on that. I think that if you're making a large batch of it, adding the sugar and vanilla at the end is a better idea. For a really quick small batch, it doesn't really matter. You can just put it all into the bowl. I think that when you're making a large batch, you want to make sure that you're getting as much air into it before you start adding other stuff. But that's also just sort of based on experience, not actual like nothing I read anywhere. Okay, I'm gonna add my tiny drop of vanilla or two. Like I said, I'm only doing about a tablespoon of the sugar for this small of an amount. you're doing a larger amount, you really want to turn the speed off, add the sugar, and turn it back on, gradually increasing it. If I had done that in a larger batch of the whipped cream, it would have been like a hilarious clouds of sugar everywhere. So it's definitely thickening, but because it's such a small amount, I want to make sure that I'm giving it a good scrape. There's a little bit of cream droplets and a little bit of powdered sugar around the sides of the pan. So I just want to make sure that all gets incorporated really well. We're about to hear the timer go off. I'm just scraping down the sides and the bottom, bringing it all together in the middle. And then I'm going to let it whisk again and tighten up. You want this to be pretty firm whipped cream, just because it needs to hold its shape as we pipe it inside the dough. If it were loose, too loose, it could just come right back out the hole that we make. So that's a trick. When you're using a KitchenAid mixer or any type of mixer, you never want to go from 0 to 10. You want to gradually increase your speed. It will really damage the motor if you constantly go from 0 to 10 to 0 to 10. It's like a step down, step up process. It will really make your equipment last a lot longer. Okay, I have got nice, thick, firm little batch of whipped cream here. I'll show you a little bit better. Bring this all together. Okay, going to pipe in nicely. Small batch in such a big bowl is kind of hilarious. We're going to deal with this in a minute. Definitely want to check this. We need to turn that heat down to 350 right away. Well, it said 15, but yeah, these are ready to go down. Mine, like I said, I made them pretty small. These are like personal size. Okay, let me show you real quick. They're holding their shape, but they're puffing up nicely. Can you see that? So I'm turning my pan 180 degrees so that the puffs are now in the back and the eclairs are up front. And they're going to finish baking. We're going to let that get pretty nice and golden brown. They're going to turn kind of a dark golden brown. And that will happen quickly, but we turn the heat down now because we don't want them to burn. They're going to keep cooking at that temperature for about 20 minutes. Double check. Yeah, it says 25. These are pretty small. I'm going to set my timer for 20. We're going to be done right at the end of class, which means I'm going to talk you through the piping and filling and glazing process. And then I'll show you, you'll get to see the pictures on Instagram, obviously, of the finished product once I'm done. The chocolate glaze, like I said, it's just pour your chocolate, pour your cream, microwave for 20 seconds, and then we're gonna stir it, and then zap it for another 20 seconds if it needs it, and then stir it. Once it's completely hot and melted through, it's done. This is my tomato collection out of the way. 20 seconds. Let me see here. The whipped cream. You can get that into a piping bag if you have one. If not, a smaller Ziploc. You're going to want to be able to pipe it into the center of the eclair. It won't really work with a spoon, so a piping bag would work best, or like a small Ziploc. We're doing this in 20-second intervals, even though I know that that's not going to melt it in the first 20 seconds. because you don't want it to burn. You certainly don't want your cream to scorch. The chocolate has already begun melting pretty well, so you stir that up and then put it back in for another 20 seconds, and we'll just keep doing that process until it is a nice chocolate glaze. It's going to look like chocolate icing. I'm not used to using the microwave like for set times of stuff. I usually just press a random number and it cooks for a while. Okay. Putting a few things away, getting some stuff ready. Let me check this whipped cream. I think that yeah. All right. I'm gonna get this into a small bag. I have little small piping bags, so I'm going to use one of those. Actually, no, I'm going to use a Ziploc so I can show you just how easy it is. One of these small sandwich bags would be great for the small amount that I made. And I put my spatula away. Here we go. So for this, I usually fold over the Ziploc so that it kind of stays open, wide mouth. Don't cut a hole in it yet. We want to just wait until we are ready to fill our eclairs. I'm doing this now so I can put this bag into the fridge. It's getting a little bit warm in my kitchen as expected. A 400-degree oven on for a while there. If I get this cooling, then it'll be even nice and fluffier and firmer when it's time to pipe it. And then when it's time, we're going to just cut one of the little corners off and pipe that in. Now that's the same thing as if you did a Ziploc for the eclairs. Just it would have been cutting a tiny corner off and then piping that in, setting this aside. This is a little bit more dishes than normal. That's okay. If you take our Thursday class, you know I love a recipe that uses no dishes. All right, I want to give these a little peek just because I'm curious. Yay, they're gonna be nice. They smell really good. Hopefully if you're baking them, your kitchen smells really nice right now. Setting some of this aside, done, done, done. And then we want to keep stirring this chocolate. Yeah, the cream gets hot, and as it continues to raise in temperature, it actually will continue to melt the chocolate. So stirring that warm cream around, it actually breaks it up even more and breaks the chocolate down even more. I think I'm only going to need maybe another 10-second zap in the microwave to get this where I want it. So, okay, when you get your eclairs and cream puffs out of the oven, they need to cool for maybe 5 to 10 minutes on a cooling rack. They're so light and they should be quite airy, so they won't take very long to cool down. Once they are cool, the cream puffs traditionally get cut in half, and you remove the top and the bottom. You fill that with whipped cream, and then you put the top back on and you dust that with a little powdered sugar. That's a traditional cream puff. The eclairs you would poke a hole in one end, pipe in the whipped cream into that hole until you'll feel it get heavier. You'll feel the cream fill the eclair. As it's full and you've got cream now all the way back to the end, then set that aside on that cooling rack. I like to use cooling racks to glaze things. It makes it a lot easier for you. If you have a rack like this, you can put it on a sheet pan or anything like a glass dish, like a casserole Pyrex or something, and then put the eclairs on top of that, and you can drizzle your glaze over. That's going to make the cleanup of the chocolate underneath a lot easier. It just drips down, and then you don't have pools of it sitting on your eclair. It drips off the side of the eclair. If you want to make a drizzle line, traditionally on an eclair you would have the chocolate just glazed straight down the top, And to do that, you would just use a spoon or a spatula and put some on one end and then gently glaze the entire top and let it set up on the top. There's a lot of fun ways you can use the glaze though, so you don't, yeah, I think that's it. You don't have to do every single one the traditional way. You can also pick up your eclair or your cream puff and kind of dip it in the chocolate and see if it sticks to that the way that you want it. Like I said, this is a really fun thing to kind of play with. If you've got kids in the kitchen with you, this is definitely a fun project to have them help with the glazing process. So I'm going to show you what we're doing here. This looks pretty smooth. If there are any bits of chocolate chip still not melted in yours, then you want to give it another few seconds in the microwave. I've got this hot spot on my oven towards the back, so I'm just going to put it there for maybe another like 5 seconds or so. It's gonna get nice and smooth. The more you stir that, the shinier it will be. I believe, I don't know, someone can write in if they know better, but I believe the more you whisk and stir, the fat molecules get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, therefore making it shinier and shinier. I think there's something about that process happens. So when you're making a ganache or this, like this chocolate glaze, which is basically a ganache, the more you stir it, the shinier it will be. So if you want to have that super extra shiny glaze, then just stir it a lot more. Which again, we're really getting our arm workouts today. So switch arms. Make sure you're doing your left, 10 seconds, your right, 10 seconds, that kind of thing. We've got, though, in the end, a very smooth, very shiny chocolate glaze frosting, okay? So I do want to keep that kind of warm. If it gets cold, if you put that in the fridge, it would get hot. Solid, it would become hard, and then we wouldn't be able to use it as a glaze or a spread. So you want to keep that not hot, but warm, where it's going to keep its consistency to be loose. The whipped cream is the opposite. You want to keep that as cold as possible until you're ready to use it. If we were doing a pastry cream filling, that would take hours. You would have to make that in advance and let it completely cool and set up, which is a much longer process. Whipped cream is already cold. The pastry cream filling, you have to cook, and then you have to cool down, and then it's a process. Delicious, though. Highly recommend trying that. Pastry cream is a great thing. I can't remember if I scheduled that for one of our later classes coming up. Let's see. Okay, we've got our glaze, we've got our filling. These are going to come out of the oven just in time for me to be able to show you kind of how to, I'm going to not wait for one of my eclairs to cool down. I'm going to show you how to poke the hole and kind of get it ready so that you can get going and do a little demo on one of them on the glaze, just so you can see that. Before I forget, what was I thinking? Next week, sorry, so many notes. Next week, I was looking at our alternative baking class. I know I actually got a couple questions recently if we ever do things like that, and I'm excited to be able to say that, in fact, yes, next week, in our baking class, we are making a vegan flourless chocolate cake. Don't let that scare you if you are not a vegan or if you're not gluten-free. That doesn't matter. This is delicious, really, really, really delicious chocolate cake. It's decadent, it's fudgy, it's amazing. So we're going to be doing our kind of alternative dessert next week, our gluten-free vegan chocolate cake. So that's exciting. And then through the rest of the quarter, we're going to be getting into some more complex stuff like making some bread. I'm excited. And we're going to be finishing the quarter off with a cake. We're going to make a cake and decorate a cake. It's going to be like a real Top Chef challenge in here, but we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm excited about that. So yeah, that is coming up down the pipe. If there are any other questions, let me take a look. What is the chocolate? The heavy cream is not incorporating. Oh, it happened. Yeah, see, it takes a minute. I know. Yeah, you really have to kind of wait for the chocolate to be just at the right melted consistency, and then comes together. It's very much like that pat a choux dough. Once you add 3 eggs, it's like, this is never going to work. It looks so gross. And then you add the 4th egg and let it mix. It's like, whoa, it's just sticky, wet dough. It's frustrating that the French called it a dough. It's not really a pastry, except that it makes pastries. But in our head, dough means like something you can firmly manage, like a bread dough or a pie dough. And it's not like that. It's very sticky. It's more like a batter. But anyway, the French, what are you going to do? I love their food. Nice. I just wanted to test. Oh, yeah. These are looking pretty good. I'm going to give them one more spin. Just again, I'm seeing the cream puffs, because they're taller, are getting much more golden brown on top than the eclairs, which are lower. I want to make sure that the heat gets distributed really evenly, moving around in the air in there. I might pull them just a hair early so I can show you, but what you're looking for is like a good light chestnut, like a golden brown, like hay. Dark hay, I guess. Dried hay, not fresh hay. I don't know what hay is. Who am I kidding? Yeah, great questions though about, that ganache is one of my favorite things. You can make it super simply on a stovetop, like I said, in a double boiler or in the microwave. And it's great as a cupcake or cake frosting or a filling. I like to put it in tarts, like lemon curd with the chocolate as a second layer. Heaven. Chocolate is my favorite cake, so this ganache is the icing that I traditionally use, because it's a little bit less heavily sweetened, like a lot of those sugar birthday cake frostings can be. You kind of know what's in it. It's just chocolate chips and cream. You can get a dark chocolate, make a nice dark chocolate ganache, and then it's really not even that sweet. Just depends on the amount of sugar that you're using. The amount of sugar in the chocolate that you're using. So you can really kind of make it a bittersweet chocolate ganache. You can do a lot of different things. You make it the same way. Just melt it with the cream, whether on top of boiling water or in the microwave. And it's a really, really versatile thing to know how to make for so many different kinds of things. Like I said, it does set up. So if you ice something with it, like frost cupcakes, and then put them in the fridge, it's going to become like a frosting. It's not going to be a loose glaze its entire life. So whatever temperature you keep it at, that's the temperature it basically keeps itself. I love ganache. This is just slightly more liquid than, well, no, this is a slightly less liquid. A traditional ganache would be equal parts chocolate and cream. And you just stir it and then let it set up. So it's even thinner as like a pourable glaze. But we want this to be kind of more like that chocolate glaze you get on donuts or eclairs. All right. I think just because of time, I'm going to show you a couple of examples, and then I'm going to let the rest of them continue cooking. But just so you can see, they've puffed up really well. But the wider ones, the ones I made the widest, got the most room inside of them that I'm going to be able to fill with cream. This little one, I might not be able to get much cream in there. I'll have to see how hollow that got. These are going to make amazing little mini cream puffs. I'm just going to take out a couple that look the most done. We're going to start with those. And then I'm going to let this finish cooking just a little bit more, because I want just a little bit more of a brown color. But so you can see these. It's gotten firm, airy. The bottom is definitely firm and browned. Listen, I don't know if this works. Here. Okay, you hear that? You actually want to be able to hear it tapping. And then the hollower it sounds, the more deep that tapping sound is, then the more air you've got inside. So I would want these to cool more, but I'm going to show you. See, we're going to see how these came out together. The cream puffs, like I said, you just cut that in half. Nice. They're actually okay. Maybe a little underdone right now. But I've got a good puff. There's a good little cavity in there. So my whipped cream is going to go right in there. And I'm going to put my little puff hat on it. Ends up looking like a little garden gnome. Kind of adorable. If I put my whipped cream in there right now, it's going to melt. So I don't really want to waste the whipped cream to do that. But so you can see what that looks like. It should have kind of a hole. It should have like a little cavity where it puffed up and created air inside. And so that should have also happened in my little eclairs. And I want to use find the side maybe that's a little fatter than the other. And very close to the bottom, I'm going to poke a little hole with a very sharp knife. Just going to remove that teeny tiny little, so there's just this very small hole. I don't know if you can see that. I think hopefully, very small little hole. So when I go to pipe in my whipped cream, I'm going to just put the tip of the bag right in that little hole and squeeze. I can see that there's some air in there. There's some cavity. It's not a dense eclair. If your eclair was flat and didn't puff, then that means that it wasn't, a couple of things could have happened. The eggs didn't get whisked in like well enough while it was still warm, and so then that creates that steam. You need the steam actually is what makes it puff while it's in the oven. If you let it get too cold and then mix in the eggs, it's gonna just sort of be like a dense batter that'll bake up whole instead of having the steam puff it up in the middle a little bit. You could have also cooked it not long enough, not well enough to bring it all together as a firm dough. And that would have just sort of made it lumpy. So it wouldn't have, again, like mixed quite well. But mostly it would have been the temperature and the egg process, mixing them in one by one. That's really important to make sure that you get that steam reaction inside. So really quickly, that's how I would have filled this with whipped cream and then dust powdered sugar on top. Or I can drizzle the glaze if I microwave it again and let it get really, really, really liquidy. I can then just drizzle it over the top. For the eclair, once it's filled and you've got your pastry, your whipped cream inside, just take a little bit of that glaze and you can just brush it over the top, or use a little cake spatula or just a butter knife. These do not have to be perfect. You can, again, dip it into the chocolate, like I said. Then you can kind of have to smooth that over. Okay. Nice, just chocolate glaze on top. That is traditional for the eclair with the cream filling. You can definitely put a chocolate glaze on your cream puff. It's your world and it's chocolate, so why not? So for that, I would definitely dip it. So I'm just dipping it right into the chocolate using my fingers. And then that's just going to get the top nice and glazed. And that can just set aside, and that'll set up as a chocolate glazed topping if it lasts that long, if you don't eat it before it even sets up. So those are the tricks of how to fill and top your eclairs and cream puffs. We'll check these out. Yeah, we're done. Oven off. These are going to cool down for a while, and I'm going to fill and finish all of them and take pictures and put them on our page. So definitely check that this afternoon. You'll get to see much better version of the finished product here. I hope that you are having fun and making them along. Thanks for everyone who had to run off. I appreciate that. You guys are so sweet to say thank you. I'm so happy that you all showed up. I'm so happy that you're here. I really hope that these work out. I hope that you have fun. If there were any issues, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I can try to help you figure out maybe what happened or what we can do differently next time. How to shoe took me a while in culinary school for me to really get this and for me to enjoy making it. But once you do, it's quick and it's a great thing to have in your repertoire. I am a churro-aholic, if that's a word that I'm gonna make up today. So being able to make them for myself, like really quick little churro bites, is a treat. You can make baked churros. You can do them in the oven, just then toss them with cinnamon sugar and dip them in your chocolate. You can kind of have a churro vibe. The pat a choux, like I said, it's better to just kind of use it as it's fresh. I have seen some people, you can do this. If you have extra dough, pipe out the eclair or the puff or the churro, pipe it into the shape on your sheet pan, and then you have to have a big enough space in your freezer for this. Freeze them, wrap it up and freeze it raw. You can then bake them from frozen. You just can't really freeze like the dough in a bag, okay? So that is one way to save the dough if you want to. I know that we're running over here. I am going to stop recording. Thank you all for being here. Send me your pictures if you made them. I can't wait to see how it turned out for everybody. And to definitely sign up or tell your friends to sign up if they haven't yet for next week. We're going to do that alternative baking. I'm really stoked about that. And all of our other workshops, you got to sign up. We've got a lot of fun things going on this week. All right. I will see everybody next time. Thanks, everyone.